Hello, everyone. Welcome home. It is so good to have you with me at the start of this week. As always, we have a great lineup for you. We're starting today's show in Ghana, where details are emerging about a cluster of coronavirus cases, more than 500 cases in one location. We're going to take you to Ghana for a live report around where this happened and how it happened. So stay with us for that. Plus, while much of the global conversation in this fight against coronavirus has been focused on the contributions of Western scientists, on today's show, we're spotlighting the efforts of African scientists in their bid to defeat this virus and get ahead in this pandemic. Plus, have you spent any time thinking about international students far away from home and what they're going through? Well, today we're going to bring you the story of one international graduate who is here in the United States. His home is Tanzania, but right now he's stuck here in the US and struggling to stay afloat. We'll bring you his story later on in the show. All of that and so much more. Let's get started. All right. So let's talk about the situation in Ghana, where we're getting more details about this cluster of cases, 533 to be precise, that were discovered at an industrial fish processing facility in the coastal city of Tema. 533 cases recently discovered. Ghana's president gave an address late on Sunday, and he shared these details. Take a listen.
It is important to stress that 533 out of the 921 new cases recorded between last Wednesday and Thursday are factory workers from a fish processing factory located in Tema. All 533 persons were infected by one person.
Did you hear that? One person responsible for the infection of 533 people in this fish processing facility in Tema. That's what you call a super spreader, one person who infects scores and scores, hundreds of people. Now, this surge in cases of 533 pushes Ghana's total to 4,700 cases, confirmed coronavirus cases now in Ghana, 4,700, which gives Ghana I guess you could describe the unwelcome distinction of leading the region of West Africa, leading in terms of the most confirmed cases. Ghana now leading the way in West Africa. Let's get more on the situation in Ghana. Joining us now is journalist Melvin Talu. He joins us from the Ghanaian capital, Accra. Melvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aisha.
So tell me about this fish processing facility. What do we know about the safety measures that were in place? What do we know about the spread of coronavirus there and how it happened?
Well, from the president's address yesterday, as you just played, he indicated that it was one person who infected the 533 persons. There were no further details about how the infection was spread. There was no details about the name of the factory, but there are speculations that have been made. Names have been speculated, and some people have mentioned names of the factory. But as we speak now, there has not been any official confirmation as to whether the names that have been mentioned is that exact factory. The president did not disclose the name of the factory. And in Ghana currently, there are stigmatization of some people in some communities. In some communities, there are some stigma. So it has been a norm yet where they don't want to disclose names of people or disclose names of factories or areas where infections have taken place because they don't want people to stigmatize those people. So I think that's why the president.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That totally makes sense, given the reaction to people who come out and confirm their coronavirus status. But in terms of oversight, in terms of safety measures in facilities in Ghana, are you aware of specific measures being put in place? I mean, beyond this fish processing facility, are we aware of what steps are being taken, generally speaking, to prevent infection?
As you are aware, as you may be aware, there have been some measures put in place generally across the board, not just for factories alone. People have been told to distance themselves socially. People have been told to adhere to wearing a face mask directive. People have been told to constantly wash their hands and to also avoid overcrowding. So these are things that are already in place everywhere. But some factories have taken further steps to ensure that their employees adhere to these directives. I've visited some companies, some Chinese companies, some Indian companies where before you enter the factory, you have to wash your hands, you have to sanitize your hands. When you are going through the factory, you have to wear face masks. Without face masks, some of them, they can't allow you to enter. I've seen a Chinese factory called Sunda, where every truck that tries to enter the factory has to be sprayed before it enters. And everybody that tries to enter the factory, you have to wash your hand. Your temperature is checked. If your temperature is above 37, you are disallowed to enter the factory. You have to wait for a while to see if your temperature will go down. If it goes down fine, you are allowed to enter. But if it's still high, you are not allowed to enter the factory. So there are some checks in place, but we don't know what exactly happened at this factory that one person affected 533 people. But there are some checks in place.
There are some checks in place. Again, I know that you already said that we don't have names. Any indication as to the severity of the cases, whether they are severely ill, whether they're hospitalized, any more detail emerging? And to add on to that, how is all of this being received there in Ghana, where they just recently eased the lockdown? What are people saying? What's been the reaction?
As the president himself said last night that all the people who have been infected so far, the 4,700 people, have been identified. They have been isolated and they are on treatment. So obviously the 533 are among the 4,700 cases that we have. So they have been isolated and they are being treated. The general reaction, people, the lifting of the lockdown seemed to make people feel that if you see the way people are behaving, it's like once the lockdown has been lifted, everything is normal. People are going about their lives normal. But there has been calls on the government to ensure the enforcement of the social distancing directives, the enforcement of the ban on public gatherings, which led to the president, for instance, last night, and extending the ban on public gathering, because before then the Ghana Medical Association, Occupy Ghana, the pressure group, had called on the president not to consider lifting the ban on public gathering. Churches were preparing to begin their services. They were putting in place measures and guidelines in case that the president lifted the ban on public gathering, they can return to churches and then see how best they can ensure the protection of their members. Those guidelines were released before the president came last night to tell people that the ban has been extended to May 31st.
Okay, so the ban has been extended. Bring us up to speed with what we're hearing on the political scene, because I certainly know that the former president has been tweeting, certainly expressing his disagreement with decisions made by the current administration. Give us some context on what's happening there on the political scene and how the opposition parties are responding to what's happening now.
Well, not just the former president alone, but his party has also been criticizing the current government. The minority held a press conference, I think, on Friday or so, complaining about how the situation is not being well managed in the country, the coronavirus situation. The minority raised concerns about how the situation is worsening. Before the president came last night to respond to criticism against his government, the Information Ministry had organized a press conference where it responded directly to the minorities' claims that the situation is worsening in Ghana, and says that the opposition NDC was clueless about what was happening in Ghana. And the president himself last night said that his political rivals were criticizing him because they want to survive. That was that they were making the criticism for political survival, like he said last night. But the opposition party believes the situation is worsening and the government is not doing enough to manage the situation.
And in light of this discovery of this cluster of cases, what is the situation with testing in Ghana now? How widespread is it? Do you have any numbers that you can share with us?
Come again, any numbers about the testing?
Yeah, how widespread is testing currently there in Ghana?
Okay, as we speak, last night the president said there has been over 160,000 tests so far. 160,000 people have so far. Over 160,000 people have been tested so far. But there are calls now for the government to move away from contact tracing and testing to mass testing, because people believe that mass testing should be the way to go and not just contact tracing and testing. Because once you have 4,700 cases, there could be many more people in the communities, in the surrounding environments that could have been infected that the government may not have traced. So the mass testing will help to bring the country up to speed in containing the virus.
Melvin Talu with the very latest there from Ghana. We appreciate the insight. Thank you so much for your reporting.
You're welcome, Aisha.
Stay safe.
You too. Bye.
Bye. So you have it there. One person responsible for 533 cases, all linked to one fish processing facility in the coastal city of Tema. No names given. We understand that everyone, according to the president, who made an address on Sunday, everybody has been traced and they are receiving medical attention. But Ghana now leading the way in terms of cases in West Africa. Let's take a quick check of the numbers for you and bring you a sense of where things stand as a whole when it comes to the spread of coronavirus on the continent. If you were with me last week, you will be aware of the fact that we passed that benchmark threshold of 50,000 cases mid last week. And here we are at the start of a new week, and we are well past 50,000. In fact, right now, if you are tracking the numbers, we are at 60,027 cases. Last week, we hit 50,000. A few days later, here we are today on Monday, and we are at 60,000 confirmed cases, 60,000 to be precise. In fact, yep, it's gone up since I last checked, 65,411. You see there, 40,392 are active, and in terms of deaths, 2,318. When you take a look at the numbers, Ghana leading the way there with 4,700. You look at Nigeria, second highest in terms of spread. Confirmed cases, remember, confirmed cases, 4,399. And then if you stay in that region, the West Africa region, Burkina Faso, 751, Togo, 174, Benin, 319. Ivory Coast, Senegal, the numbers also going up there, as you see, 1,700 for Ivory Coast, Senegal, 1,886. The latest in terms of numbers there on the continent. We have gone way past that 50,000 mark we were talking about last week that we hit. 65,000 now. That's where we are. The numbers continue to spread. As always, we say on the show that it's absolutely critical that you are part of this conversation. What makes the show different from the experience of watching it on television is that you can be part of the dialogue. You can message in real time and express your opinion, your thoughts, what you like, what you don't like, what you agree with, what you disagree with. So I encourage you to be part of the conversation and to send in your messages, because your voice is most important of all. But let's take it one step further. Don't just send messages during the show. We actually want to hear from you on video. How is this pandemic affecting you? How are the curfews, the lockdowns, the economic hardships? What do they mean for your life? Send us a video. It doesn't have to be long, about 2 minutes. Just give us your name, the country you're from, what you're doing, and share with us what you are experiencing. Just go to our Facebook page. Let me give you those details now. You have no excuse to our Facebook page. And go to our Facebook page. There you have it. There you go. Send it to us there. Your messages, your pictures, your videos, everything you want us to know. Go there. The Isha Sesay Facebook page, the Home with Isha Sesay show. You can find it, put it in, send us your thoughts, and be part of the conversation. I shall be waiting to hear from you. Okay. Now, as you know, the continent is no stranger to outbreaks of infectious diseases, and the decades of experience that we've had in fighting those outbreaks are proving beneficial in this moment as we face a new threat, which is, of course, coronavirus. Dr. Christian Happy is the director of the African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious diseases. And he will be joining us later to talk about the situation there and the work he is doing in battling coronavirus and the advances they're making in researching in terms of coming up with a diagnostic test and looking for a vaccine. Before he joins us, let's talk about innovation. Let's talk about innovation and how there's an opportunity for the continent in this moment as we battle this pandemic. How do we take this moment and move forward? We are already leading the way when it comes to digitization. We are showing the way this can be done on the continent. We have leapfrogged computers and gone straight to smartphones. But what else? What else is happening in this moment? Joining me now is a man who knows. Eric Sakwan is a renowned tech entrepreneur with Chanzo campus. He also teaches at Harvard University. I don't know how he finds the time to do all of this, but he joins us now from Accra. Eric, welcome. Eric, I think you might have to unmute.
Thank you.
Hey, hi.
It's a pleasure to be on.
It's great to have you with us. I'm super interested in hearing how you view this moment. Of course, there's a lot of hardship. There's a lot of concern and impact on life, health, well-being. But in the tech space, in the innovative space, there is something else that is happening. Share with us your perspective on this moment.
So what we are seeing is actually a speeding up of digitization on the continent. Just in terms of relaying what you said, because most people are locked down, they are forced to go online. And so most people are beginning to do activities online, like, ordering food, ordering groceries. We're seeing that people are doing their COVID assessment using some of our, portfolio companies' applications. And we are seeing also that more and more people are learning online. And so some of our portfolio companies that are into online learning are suddenly getting spike in their numbers. So what we are seeing is an unintended consequence of the COVID-19 lockdown, which is that more and more people are getting to the digital economy across the country.
And what does this mean for the way our economies operate? What does this mean for our growth?
Well, it means that we are going to see digitization as a critical part of our economy going forward. And part of this is in the sectors in which we're seeing it. So, for example, if we take financial services, more and more people are going to consume financial services using mobile money, using electronic means of trading online, as opposed to using credit or debit card. We are going to see more and more people accessing online means of learning. And so, for example, our portfolio company, eCampus, suddenly realized that now teachers are teaching students on the platform through live interactive sections, similar to what you're doing now. So a teacher logs in, the students log in, and they're taking their class as if they were in the classroom, right? So you're going to see more and more of this going forward. We're seeing this also in how health services are delivered. So one of the companies that I'm involved in is it's a local leading health service called Nyaho. Nyaho built something called Serenity. And Serenity is the online platform. And with COVID-19, we developed a chatbot, and that chatbot allows you to do a COVID-19 assessment at home so that it calibrates the probability that you're going to get a disease before you go to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So this has reduced a lot of pressure that hitherto the health service would have, the clinics and health service would have had, because everybody would have been rushing to the hospital to take an assessment, right? So you're going to see more and more of this in most African economies and in most sectors as we overcome COVID-19, because it's going to become a way of life. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, there's a grocery store that 2 years ago, I walked past there to buy groceries, and I wanted to pay with mobile money. And the agent said, look, I don't take mobile money. Guess what? 2 weeks ago, I go there, and she is ready to take more than mobile money. And now she can put her stuff online, and so I can order for home and just go pick it up, right? So suddenly, I wouldn't have to go and wait in the queue to buy stuff. More and more of these businesses are going online. And one of the platforms they're using is also our portfolio company, a company called Haptel. Mm-hmm. So Haptel basically allows all these small mom and pop shops to have an online storefront, and then gives them the mobile money and other forms of payment through their digital wallet. And mm-hmm. so these small businesses can now go online, and they can accept online transactions, and they can deliver, right? So Haptel gives them the 10-key solution where you are able to order and pay with mobile money, and then ask for a delivery agent, which is a third party, to basically pick the order and deliver it to you. So we believe that this is how e-commerce is going to evolve on the continent.
And my question is, for e-commerce to thrive, though, what is needed? Because talk to me about, the uptake. I mean, there's certainly challenges, whether it's power, whether it's penetration of mobile. I mean, talk to me about what is needed to make this flourish into a fully sustainable ecosystem.
So there were three critical things that were needed. So one is the payments. The second is being able to go online. And then the third is fulfillment, right, for the thing delivered. Before, the biggest challenge was payment. So payment is solved. Online is solved. Now the challenge is fulfillment. Okay, how do you deliver to people? Interestingly, now you can deliver using the mobile phone as a way of tracking or addressing, right? I mean, there's companies like Snooko that uses your phone as an address. And so somebody can come straight to you. One of our companies in South Africa is called Zuzi. Zuzi basically does grocery delivery, and this is one of the ways by which they deliver is they triangulate your address using your phone. And so the delivery person comes to you triangulating to get to your phone, right? So wherever you are, they can deliver to you. That company actually just closed a 30 million rand round this last week from a Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed company. We actually announced the deal today. And this is a company that has doubled its revenues and making 1 million rand of deliveries every day during this COVID-19 period. And 2 weeks ago, the company employed 100 people. So whilst people are being laid off, this company is growing exponentially because of COVID-19.
And just to be clear, are we looking at these African-owned? Are these African-inspired innovation breakthroughs? Talk to me about that in terms of this rise in African entrepreneurs in the space.
So it's a very powerful paradigm shift that I noticed probably about 10 years ago. And there are a couple of factors that were responsible for that. The first is the availability of broadband. And the fact that the youthful population in Africa took to technology and took to mobile. And suddenly they believed in themselves and believed that they could actually create the next Facebook or Google from Africa. For me, that was a very powerful paradigm shift. And it's a function of getting access to technology and realizing that you can actually build your own technology and not necessarily be on the consumption side of the equation. So I believe that the millennials of Africa have actually realized that they could be on the production side of the equation, and technology is the entry because it's all about software. It's all about brain power. It's all about the ability to imagine and then being able to program what you imagine. And guess what? Because there's a lot of challenges in Africa, that becomes the bedrock for innovation because necessity is the mother of invention. And everywhere you go in Africa, there are challenges, right? So the youths are realizing that we could actually express ourselves by solving these problems using mobile technology. And for me, that's the very powerful paradigm shift that got me into investing in these entrepreneurs and mentoring them.
It's such an important message and story to get out there, that we are creating, that Africa's youth are leading the way and they are reshaping the trajectory of the continent. Eric, I'm so glad you were able to join us and share some insights into the ventures you're investing in and just what you're seeing across the tech landscape as a whole. Eric Zuckerman, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Stay safe.
You too. Bye now.
Bye. All right. So if that doesn't shift your thinking about the continent, I don't know what will. Young people reimagining the future and using tech to move that closer to them. An incredible conversation there to see how in real time we are making these shifts, and whether it's having groceries delivered, whether it's mobile money, we are seizing tech and we're leading the way in digitization. And that is an important story that we should share far and wide. Okay, so when it comes to the health part, the science of fighting this virus, a lot of the conversation has been focused on what is happening in the West. A lot of it has been settled on talking about the breakthroughs that are happening in America or in Europe, and the hard work that African scientists are doing on the continent, or even in labs that aren't in the continent, has been largely in the shadows. But they are working. they are working, they're doing important work, and they're making breakthroughs. And we want to talk about that now and why it's important to have Africans on the front line of the fight against this pandemic for our continent. Joining me now is Dr. Christian Happy. He's the director of the African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases at Redeemers University in Nigeria. He's one of Africa's leading scientists. He helped sequence the Ebola genome during that outbreak in 2014, which you may remember. He also is the first person in Africa to take a closer look at the coronavirus genome and the COVID-19 genome, to be specific, and to sequence that. He's now using technology to help in the fight against COVID-19. He joins us now to talk to us about his efforts. Dr. Happy, welcome.
Thank you, Isha. Nice to be on air.
It's good to have you with us. Let me start by asking you to just frame your perspective. Why is it important, in your view, to have African scientists on the front lines in the fight against this pandemic as it affects our continent?
Well, I do think that, Africa should be speaking stories of Africans by themselves. I think we've come a long way. Coming from 2014, where we didn't have the ability to respond to disease outbreak like Ebola, but I think we've grown over the past 6 years, and then we've now at a stage where we can definitely start telling African stories from African perspective, and also using, the challenges within Africa actually to provide solution to African problems. I think, the lesson learned from COVID, from Ebola, and then the Lassa outbreak, and then the previous outbreak in Africa actually paved the way actually for Africans to actually take this heads on and then start leading the way and then leading the world on the way to respond to this pandemic.
And what is happening in labs that have African scientists in them? Where are you seeing the breakthroughs? Where's the focus right now?
Well, I think if you can look at the curve in Africa, it's significantly different from what you're seeing elsewhere. And this is basically because there is a strong cohesion in Africa between the labs and then the Public Health Institute in terms of, guiding public health intervention and then coordinating the response on the African continent. And this is something that Africa have learned because we are definitely on outbreak mode, our outbreak response mode all the time. In Africa, we're always dealing, if you look at the health, news in Africa, is always an outbreak of some disease somewhere. And this has really given us the impetus to sit down and then see how we can integrate laboratory information that is using leading edge technologies and integrate that into the public health response. And this is, I believe, one of the things that is making the difference. So one example of that is, for instance, the fact that when we were informed about the first index case of COVID-19 in Nigeria, for instance, where my lab is, within 48 hours, we were able to lay down that is the viral, the genomic map of the virus. And that gave us actually a better insight into the origin of the virus. Although this first index case was an Italian, but we actually were able to pinpoint the fact that the virus actually came all the way from Switzerland. And that virus was somehow related, to the Wuhan virus. But then this is exactly the kind of approach that we're using in order to actually elucidate, have a better insight into not only the virus, but also its biology. So this type of information is actually enabling us not only to sit down and consume information from overseas, but start thinking about generating the next generation of diagnostics, and also thinking about how we can use such information to produce vaccine. So we've gone from a position of consumers of information to producers of information, and then that's really very helpful to the world.
And so you mentioned diagnostics. I know you're working in this space. What does the knowledge that you have gained from sequencing or from mapping that case, that index case, what does that mean, or how does that impact what the diagnostic test would look like?
One major breakthrough that we have is that you're going to use a conventional way of diagnosing, COVID-19. For instance, we are going from a conventional PCR-based test to a rapid diagnostic test. And we did this during the Ebola outbreak, and we want to use the same platform to develop a rapid diagnostic test. So which means that we're going to reduce dramatically the turnaround time. that takes for a sample to be analyzed, and then therefore the medical doctor in any of the most remote places in Africa can have the result of the test in near real time. This becomes very critical into the way we'll be responding to the outbreak. So, and in order to do that, we are learning from the genome data, and then from the genome data, we actually focus in some very specific areas of the genome that we can actually use to generate the diagnostics. For instance, one of the diagnostics that we're developing is actually called Sherlock. This diagnostic is absolutely just doing a DNA-based diagnostic paper on a mere piece of paper. And by doing this, we can move this to the most remote areas of Africa. The reason why we are using this approach is because we understand our situation. We understand the fact that in Africa, we do not have all the resources. We need to bring down the technology to the point of care diagnostics, and that's what Africa needs. We really do not need a very high core, high quality technology. We need things that are very appropriate to our context, things that are very appropriate to Africa's.
Talk to me about vaccines. You mentioned vaccines as well. I know that it's an area of focus in your lab. Again, what does it mean to have it being researched and potentially made by Africans? Talk to me about the difference in that process and the product versus it being created by Western scientists.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very great question, Aisha. So I think one thing that we're doing now is actually, first of all, start sequencing the vaccines, the viruses that are circulating in Africa. By sequencing the viruses circulating in Africa, we know exactly the genetic map of those viruses, and we know exactly what area to target. And by doing this, it means that we'll be creating vaccines that are very specific for the kind of viruses that are circulating in the continent. Now, the good thing about this and the big deal about this is that generally, and if you go back in history, Africa does not contribute in vaccine development. We're always recipient of technologies developed from overseas. And these technologies at times are not really specified or made for Africa or for the strains of pathogens that are circulating in Africa. Now, we are no longer consumers of vaccine development. We're actually producers. So we are bringing into knowledge, we are bringing into new ways of actually producing vaccines. And in this way, we'll be producing things that are more peculiar or more specific to what circulates in Africa. One of the challenges that we do have in Africa over the time is that not only we do not contribute knowledge to the tools that are going toward vaccine development, and therefore, some of these vaccines are imposed on us without really checking if these things are of any use in Africa, if these things are appropriate for the strains of pathogens that are circulating in Africa. This time along, we are changing the narrative. We are bringing on information from Africa, and we are creating the knowledge within Africa, and then the knowledge for Africa, and then we are ready to actually export the knowledge from Africa to the rest of the world.
It's phenomenal. It's so exciting. I'm getting excited just to hear this shift once more. It follows on from the conversation we had about tech, to hear in science how we're leading the way in this fight. Do you think the contributions made by people such as yourself in your labs in Africa will be readily embraced and welcomed by the rest of the world? Not that it matters, to be honest, because as long as, we have 1.3 billion people, to be honest, to care for. But as a more theoretical question, do you think it will be readily embraced by the rest of the world?
I think, I think one of the reasons why some of us left places like Harvard and to come to Africa is actually to change the narrative. We actually came to create what I call the scientific revolution of the 21st century. Mm-hmm. Africa should be the continent that should be preferring solution to infectious diseases. Africa should be the solution, the continent that should be producing the drugs and the vaccines and then the diagnostics against all of the pathogens that are circulating, because we own them. And I always say it without any shame that I'm proud to be of my African heritage. I'm very proud not only of the natural resources that God endowed Africa with. I'm also proud, to host all of the viruses and the pathogens, because as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't be seen as challenges. They should be seen rather as opportunities in disguise, because we should be the champion. We should be the producers. And I think the time has come where now we master the technology, and the time has also come now we can now use those viruses and then those pathogens that are circulating in Africa to create solution. Because we should be the one producing the vaccine for malaria, producing the vaccine for Lassa fever, for yellow fever, because these viruses live with us. And there's no reason why we shouldn't harness the knowledge that we have to create and provide the solution for the world.
I couldn't agree more. Dr. Harry, I have to ask you, as you talk about science, importance of science, of good science that cares for our people, I've got to ask you about this COVID organics, this tonic out of Madagascar with no disclosed scientific data to support the claims made by President Rajoelina that it has cured people. You know, I saw a quote the other day that said, you can't have Africans saying, you know, or widely condemning the statements made by those two French doctors on TV weeks ago who talked about coming to test, you know, unproven vaccines on Africans. You can't, on the one hand, be criticizing that effort to test unproven science on Africans and support the testing of an unproven tonic on our people who may have COVID-19. How do you see it? Where do you stand in this debate?
Well, this is the point. What I'm saying is the reason why I stand against the French doctor that was saying this is because for vaccine development, there's a process. You don't wake up one day and then you don't go through the preclinical trials and then phase 1 and phase 2 trials and they say you are going to a continent to test people. There is a process. Did they actually follow the process? I said no. I think it is very wrong for them to have jumped out the gun and they just think that the best place to go and try this is in Africa. They could have actually demonstrated, first of all, that it's working in animal model, and then that it's working in a phase 1 trial, for instance. You see what is happening in Oxford. Try that in some people in those countries. Put them in, take some Caucasians and then get them there and test them and prove to us that it's working. Then we'll have no argument, no problem to say, okay, well, it has worked. Let's expand it in multiple country and a multiple country trial where you have in several places in the world and within which Africa. I have no problem with that. Now let's drive the point home. For instance, for the organic medicine that is in Madagascar, right? Yes, it is not scientific, but I disagree also with the people that will just brush that aside and then say, well, it is not working. I think even behind any what I call crazy idea, let's try to see what makes sense out of it. Can we actually just sit down and then say, instead of saying it is not working, can we say, okay, let's try to see how and organize a normal scientific trials?
But should our leaders be accepting it and potentially giving it to populations at this stage when it hasn't been through clinical trials? I mean, I think that to me is the critical question here. I don't disagree that we should be looking in all areas, herbal, formal, whatever, conventional. But the challenge I have, and this is where you're the scientist that I need you to weigh in, is it hasn't, as I understand, been through clinical trials. Should we be, giving it out to people? Should we be taking it in batches across various countries?
I'm not a proponent of just doing the mass distribution. No. But what I'm saying is that a quick clinical trial of this medicine can be done in a way that we can actually we can have some information and that will tell us exactly where we stand with it. And in situation of emergency, we did not need to go through all the phases of clinical trial, for instance, to have this kind of approval. If we have a clear demonstration that this is working in few patients and then we scale up to a larger number of patients, we can actually, the regulators within Africa can give approval under emergency use. So this is acceptable. What I'm saying is, yes, I do agree with you that we need to do this, but also I disagree with the fact that because it is something that comes from within Africa, it is just brushed aside by the World Health Organization. I disagree with that principle. Yeah.
Dr. Habi, it is so great to speak to you. I hope you'll come back so we can have a longer conversation and you can share more of the work you're doing and the breakthroughs you're achieving. Thank you. Thank you for the great insight.
Thank you, Isha. Looking forward to talk to you soon when we have more data.
Looking forward to it too. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great perspective there from an African scientist with his own lab there in Nigeria, really really capturing and summarizing the need for Africans to be at the forefront of research and development of vaccines and tests that really we need to fight the outbreaks that occur on our continent. And that when they're made with a specificity for us, they work better. Also, you heard his opinion there on the COVID organics tonic that is being accepted by various African leaders. In his view, Dr. Happy saying you can't just discount it because it comes from Africa, but it should undergo clinical trials, which can be done quickly so we can get the information around whether or not it does actually work and cure patients, as the president of Madagascar alleges. All right, you have been writing in, you are watching. I am so grateful. Thank you for being with me. Let's get to some of those comments now. I'm definitely interested in hearing what you have to say. Lots of people in the house writing in. Let me see. Matilda Jallo, I totally agree with Dr. Happy. Matilda says, thank you for being with us. People talking about the digital tech conversation I had with Eric Asakwan a few moments ago. This from Abdul Toure saying Sierra Leone needs to put the system in place in times of digital technology, social security to all Sierra Leoneans, the place you live, give account of who enters and leaves the country. Basically, Abdul Toure, and thank you for that comment, just saying that we need to see digitization in place because it will help in moments like this. Someone writing in, this George Kamara, talking about the COVID organics conversation we're just having, saying that unless there's a control group and an experimental group, it's junk science. Again, saying that we need to have structures, we need to have it, properly organized. For want of a better word, these trials that are done of this COVID organics has to follow procedures and protocols that are established and known to govern such clinical trials. Collins writing in, yes, a quick clinical trial could be done. Absolutely agree. Kade Mansoure writing from London says, I completely agree with him. That is Dr. Happy. Lots of people writing in, asking for updates from Sierra Leone and the numbers there. We know that the numbers continue to go up in terms of coronavirus cases. I should try and get those for you. John Gordon, Africa Season Tech. I love it. Thanks for providing a platform to highlight this trend. You are welcome, John Gordon. Also, Ibrahim Sesay, there's definitely going to be a behavioral change. I'm hoping he's referencing the situation regarding tech. And supporting tech on the continent, that there has to be a behavioral change to embrace it. Lots of comments, people writing in from all over the place, lots of Sierra Leoneans writing in. My people, thank you. Thank you for being with me on this day, and people in from London, Dakar, all over the place. We have them watching from Ghana, from the UK. Thank you to everyone who's in the house. Really grateful. Stay with me, continue to write in. We're going to continue to try and get more of your comments in as the show goes on. I want to move on to another story for you now. And this now is really about how this coronavirus pandemic is separating individuals from loved ones. It's happening all over the world. And given the fact that there's no vaccine on the horizon, the chance of reunions seem, a little bit out in the future. No vaccine, borders being closed, just a whole load of hurdles in the way for people to be reunited from loved ones that they're separated from, who may be in other parts of the world. And this is a situation for a lot of international students who are here in the United States. And I want to bring in the story of one student in particular now. This is a situation that Uzan Verji finds himself in. He's originally from Tanzania, but he has elderly relatives back home, and concerns of infecting them, plus just financial obstacles, have meant that he's now here in the United States, sort of stuck here in the United States, really, and really just trying to figure out what comes next. He's an international graduate student at Harvard Medical School, and he joins us now from Boston. Uzan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Isha. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. So tell me about what's going on. Talk to me about the situation back home and your decision initially, of course, when you had to weigh up whether to go or to stay. What was going on? How you reached that point?
Right. So I think there were two things that really played into my decision to just stay here in the United States. So I'm Tanzanian. I don't have a lot of family here. So for me, the dorm rooms that I was living in was my home, right? That was my kitchen that I cooked in. That's where I saw all my friends. That was my community. And overnight, I didn't have that anymore. So I had to make the very tough decision to not go home, specifically because of the fact that I didn't want to expose my parents. So my mom is over 50 years old. She has ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune disease. My grandfather has diabetes and high blood pressure, and I'm an only child. So for me, it was a tough decision to not try to expose them in any way possible. And the second reason I chose not to go home was financial, right? I already had a ticket booked to go home, but I couldn't get any of that money back. I got a travel voucher. And so a lot of my finances were now spent on getting a sublease here in the US to find a roof over my head. And really pay for all the food and amenities that I would have to for however long this is going to go on for.
So where are you living now, and how long have you been there?
So I am currently living in a sublet. Actually, one of my friends at Harvard Medical School was moving out, and I was really grateful to her. She gave me her sublet, her place, for a really discounted price. And so I'm currently living here. And I have a kitchen to cook, so I'm trying to get some groceries and really keep myself occupied by cooking some meals. And that's where I find myself now.
And you've been there for how many weeks now? 6 weeks? I mean, when did the university shut down?
So I think it was almost mid-March is when I moved out. And so unfortunately now my friend's lease is ending at the end of May. So I will have to now search for another place and pack up all my stuff and move out again. And so I'm just looking for another lease, another sublet place that I can move into.
And the school authority is giving any support to students like yourself who find themselves stuck here for various reasons and trying to figure out what to do? What support are you getting from student bodies, student college authorities?
So there's actually been an overwhelming amount of support. And I've actually been involved a lot in that, trying to ensure that all students like me have resources available to them. So Harvard Medical School has provided temporary housing for those students who don't have any other place to go at Harvard Business School. I also helped sort of champion this initiative where they started an emergency fund for anyone who needs additional financial resources. And so I'm really grateful for that as well. So there definitely is help from the school. And right now, I guess Harvard Medical School is my family, and that's where I find most of my help.
How is your family doing back home? And certainly, how does your mother feel about the fact you are more or less kind of marooned out here? You know, college isn't happening. You've got this travel voucher now. You're kind of trying to find a place to live. How are they doing? And how worried is she about you?
I think in the initial stages, she was a lot more worried about me, given the fact that everything she was hearing on the news. She was a little concerned about me being in Boston on my own and potentially contracting COVID-19. But it's interesting how it's now switched. It's flipped now. It's now I'm the one who is unable to sleep at night because I'm concerned about my parents' health and the condition right now in Tanzania. And I think that's also something that's stressing them out a lot. So financially, I come from a very low income family. And so my parents have had to try to figure out how to sustain themselves for the next few months by staying at home, really. And so I think that's what's been on my mind a lot. And that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the plan? What's the plan going forward for you?
So for starters, all I can really do is pray. But the other plan that I have is to try to help out in any way that I can to ensure that my fellow citizens and brothers and sisters back home in Tanzania really know what's going on and really have the information at their fingertips to avoid contracting this really deadly disease. And so I've really just kept myself occupied with a number of different projects to really get the message out there.
Yeah, well, Uzanveji, we're grateful that you're here to share your story, because we know there are a lot of students who are in a similar position, international students far from home, who for financial reasons and just the breakdown in travel can't get back home. So thank you for sharing what you're going through. We're keeping your parents in our thoughts and prayers. You stay safe out there in Boston, and we'll check in with you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much, Isha.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It's tough. You don't think about all the different ways this pandemic is affecting different people, but spare a thought for those students who are separated from loved ones because of financial, restrictions or limitations, and also the fact that air travel is just crazy now, that they can't get home. It's another dimension to this crisis that we all need to bear in mind, and definitely something that will stay with me, and we'll check in with Uzana in the weeks ahead. Before we go, that we're keeping an eye on 5 important stories, and we think that you should do the same. Let me run those through for you. South Africa, keeping a very close eye on South Africa, which has now hit 10,000 confirmed coronavirus cases. You may remember that they had started to ease that strict lockdown in late April. Relief for many people, obviously. It was so strict they couldn't even go out and jog. But here we are now. It is May, and the country has surged past 10,000 confirmed cases. At last check, they had recorded 10,652 confirmed cases and more than 200 deaths. It is grim news. What's also grim is the fact that President Cyril Ramaphosa telling South Africans in a newsletter on Monday that they should prepare themselves to be dealing with coronavirus for at least a year, maybe even longer. He also said in that newsletter, it will not be life as we knew it before. We're watching South Africa and the surge in cases. Kenya now, so to the east of the continent, Kenya has now released 7,000 prisoners in a bid to decongest prisons and to slow the spread of coronavirus there in the country. This comes as the Interior Minister revealed to a Senate committee a few days ago that 2 cases of the virus had been found amongst the prison population in Nairobi. According to local media, the Ministry of Health now is conducting mass testing in all prisons in Nairobi. Also to remind you that there is, of course, that lockdown in place, a limitation on movement in and out of Nairobi, also in and out of Mombasa and 2 other counties as well. Turning to Burundi and the center of the continent, where they will be having elections in just over a week from now. They'll be having elections, and we are learning that the government there has said to the East African community, the regional bloc, that they are not or better yet, they can send election observers if they want, but those election observers will have to go into quarantine for 14 days. So in other words, they won't be able to actually monitor the election. Burundi also saying to the EAC that they should just use staff that are already in country to act as monitors. Burundi also having rejected the UN and other civil society organizations to come in and observe these polls. The last elections in Burundi were in 2015. They were widely, certainly seen as lacking in credibility and free and fair. That was a view of many international and regional bodies. 4th story that we're following for you is out of Nigeria, and this story coming to us from Southern Rivers State, where the governor there has demolished 2 hotels. The governor of Rivers State has demolished 2 hotels because he claims they were flouting lockdown restrictions. The hotel managers have both been arrested. One of the men, a relative, has told local media that they weren't flouting restrictions. Nonetheless, these 2 hotels have been demolished. That's the situation in the south. In the north, in Nigeria, we're also getting word that there is going to be a lockdown of 3 areas of Bauchi State. The 3 areas that border Kano will be under a total lockdown, which will be starting anytime now. According to the governor, this will be so that authorities there can mount effective contact tracing and testing, because they've seen a spike in cases there in the north. And finally, ending with the story out of Madagascar. As you know, we're closely following the situation regarding COVID organics, and Today, we're learning that a number of African countries have taken delivery of batches of the herbal tonic, which is purported to cure coronavirus, though, again, it is unproven. We'll keep saying that here. Among the countries that have taken a delivery, Chad, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, Comoros, Guinea-Bissau, all of them taking delivery of this drink. Madagascar's president has been speaking to French broadcasters and has said that essentially his country is getting criticism, is being condemned for this drink because they aren't European. That essentially, he said this, if it weren't Madagascar, but a European country that had discovered the remedy COVID organics, would there be so many doubts? I do not think so. Those are the words from President Rajoelina of Madagascar. All I'll say is there should be criticism of anything that comes from anywhere in the world that doesn't have the disclosed science to back it up. We can't be experimenting on our people. Let's put us through clinical trials. If it works, then, by all means, we're all looking for a way out of this crisis. But as of yet, there is no disclosed science to back up this man's claims that this thing works. And until that is the case, it's just dangerous. And the WHO, ECOWAS, and Africa CDC have all said this thing needs to be tested, clinical tests, before it is widely distributed. So we're going to stay on that story for you. All right, as always, we end the show here on the bright side because we believe that as difficult as life is, we've still got to search for the bright side. We've got to find joy. We've got to hold on to it because it's going to keep us sane. It's a way of holding on to our humanity. As bleak as it is, we must find joy. We must find the space to laugh and to just try and find some kind of normalcy in these abnormal times. And our guest today, joining us on the bright side shortly, is someone who has taken the art world by storm. Take a look.
Happy Monday, everyone. I hope everyone had a great weekend. Today, I hop on Instagram Live with the incomparable Isha Sesay, whom I've followed for years as she's traveled around the globe, creating incredible platforms of visibility for a broad range of people to share her stories. And today, I get to hop on live Instagram with her to talk about people, to talk about art and art worlds around the globe, and artists like the lovely Xander Bloom from South Africa, whose work I have on my wall. Been quarantining like everybody else, taking care of myself, homeschooling with my daughter, hopping on and off lots of Zoom meetings, looking at a lot of art online, following a lot of artists on social media, thinking about what they're doing, how all of the kind of craziness that we're dealing with has forced them to think differently, work differently. And I'm excited to share all of this with Isha and all of you. See you soon.
I can't wait to speak to Isolde. She's going to be with me in just a few minutes. She's going to be joining me on Instagram at the top of the hour, so about 2 minutes from now. Before we go, two quick updates. You obviously were with me as I spoke to Uzan Verji, the Tanzanian student who's basically cut adrift here in the United States. He can't get home. We just got a note in from Sylvester Kawa saying, I should say my family and I will give him a place to stay in our home. That is so enormously kind of you. Send us some more details. We'll obviously pass them on to Uzan because he is struggling to find somewhere to stay. His lease is about to end and he's now looking for a new place. Another message that just came in from Bakyash, who's asking about the vaccine and whether there's been, I see this, Bakyash, is there scientific proof of a safe vaccination? As of yet, Bakyash, there isn't. They are still doing clinical trials in different parts of the world. There are a number of trials underway, one in Oxford, some here in the United States. Small numbers of people that have been given, vaccine, others given a placebo to see if it works. As of yet, we're waiting to see whether it poses any problems, whether it's safe, whether it works. Right now, we just don't know. And most people, most scientists that we speak to say there will not be a vaccine this year, that we'll be looking at 2021 at the earliest for a vaccine. And so, yes, we're looking to see whether it's safe, whether it's effective. As of yet, we don't have answers there. But the other thing I will caution is that even when they find the vaccine that is safe and is effective, there's still the question of manufacturing it in large numbers and distributing it. And, there are more than 7 billion people in the world, so we are a long way to go. But thank you for all your questions. Thank you for being with me throughout this hour. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, more great guests, more insight into this pandemic and how it's affecting us on the continent and at large, and just, more great conversation that I hope you'll be part of. So do join me here tomorrow, whether you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you again in a couple of hours. Stay safe. Join me on Instagram. I'll be there. Basically, I should be there now to talk to Isolde about what's happening in her life and in the art world as we battle this pandemic together. Stay safe, everyone. Bye for now.